Oh boy, looks like it's that time of the year. Uh, what the heck is that? Alright, impressions time.
Let the lesson begin.
Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Alright guys, so it's that time of the year and it's literally Fallen Heroes, which means lots to talk about and lots of hype regarding it. Now, compared to most years, there is some reason to talk about this stuff, and that comes down to mostly the Spark system. And now you can kind of guarantee them. You get the free tickets off of Forging Bonds and Celestial Stone on top of that, kind of incentivizing us as players to possibly consider one-offs of these units or potential future merge projects. So yeah, I will go over all these new units, plus I'll give you guys my impressions on them, and likely as like a one-off or a +1 at best, so I don't assume you're going to go for a +10, although if you do, they'll likely be way better. Most Fallen Heroes tend to be pretty good at time of release, but not all of them age well. I'm looking at you, Grima. I'm looking at you, Fallen Celica. I'm looking at you, Fallen Marita. They don't always age really well, but these ones definitely are worth a little bit of talking about. So let's jump into it, shall we? As always, I will pause when it gets to the skill sets. Plus, I'll give you guys my impressions of the units themselves, art, and all that. Although I'm not fully. Like, I don't understand Three Houses' full story, so some of this might be spoilery. Although I know enough to kind of get an inference as to what's happening here. But yeah, keep spoilers out of comments, just for the sake of myself and for others that haven't played through it. So yeah, okay, so this is like a legendary version. We have the legendary version of Dimitri here, not the brave version, so we can expect that he's likely similar. Lance infantry, it's not that many, so the competition isn't that much for him. Alright, so looking at Dimitri's skills here, he's got a preference B skill and he's got a preference weapon. He has a Tempest just like his legendary form does. Although, looking at the weapon, there are some notable things here to realize is he doesn't have a slaying built in compared to the legendary version. It demands a solo condition. It gives him some attack and speed, but also the condition, the last part of it says essentially his attack, if his attack is better than his foe's defense, which generally should be true, I would think, he does 50% additional damage as true damage, kind of similar to what Catrio's weapon did, the Glimmer effect. However, that condition is only met if he cannot make a follow-up attack, which is kind of weird, because that means like you want to attack into enemies who are potentially faster than you or equal speed or have worry fighter effects, something like that. So that secondary condition doesn't seem like it would always meet, but nonetheless, if it does, the amount of damage it would add, considering he likely has a very high attack stat, is pretty good. Now, what is cool is the preference B skill, which is similar to Near Trace, but better. And the thing that makes it better, as long as he's solo, and here's again, he wants a solo condition, is its wind sweep. Foe cannot counterattack. That is really good. Really, really, really good. So Odd Tempest combined with that preference B skill is going to give Dimitri a lot of synergy. I can't really see much place to put him in terms of like AR offense, but I'm sure in Arena and AR defense, he'll definitely have some place which will work pretty well. Like just thinking off the top of my head, he cannot make a follow-up attack. That would work already really good against Spectre. It's worry kind of built into his weapon, and he has a wind sweep built in. So on defense, you'd already not want to use someone like Spectre against him, because, well, he gets all his weapon effects built in. The thing though that does again that makes me a little bit questionable is whether he would actually have more attack than, like, let's say Vector's defense. So that's something to consider. However, I wouldn't jump straight into this one saying it's a must-have. It just seems useful, like Dimitri overall. I mean, my problem here is like Ingrid's Lewin and like Ingrid in general kind of has a similar overlap, but is Cav and doesn't rely on Odd Tempest. That was like that's like kind of my don't feel too strongly about him. I feel like Ingrid kind of does what he does better. Okay, anyways, next up is Male Morgan with Pledgian attire, looking pretty. I like this art. Actually, looks really good. And he's a Red Tome Infantry, so same as his 4-star version. Jeez. Alright, so keeping to the theme of Pledgian debuffs make me stronger effect, he comes with a new Menace C-skill, which essentially is just threaten, but from a 4 range radius. So, yeah. Okay, a weapon itself. I'm going to try to summarize this without reading the whole thing for you folks. Basically, the condition is easy to meet, 25% health. He gets extra attack and res, or rather he debuffs the enemy, and therefore that makes him stronger. But it takes the combination of his own bonuses and the enemy's debuffs, and based on the total amount there, in increments of 5, 10, and 15, he gets bonus effects. With 5 being enemy cannot follow up attack, 10 being I can follow up attack, and 15 being a guard effect hitting the opponent. So that's pretty stacked, and honestly the condition 5, 10, 15 isn't that hard to meet. Of course, lulls play into that. Like, for example, if enemy has a lull, then it would be harder for Morgan's own buffs to take effect to meet the conditions, or negating penalties. But generally speaking, most opponents shouldn't be running both lulls and negating penalties to really shut down a weapon like this. So it is fairly interesting that he's going to get all these effects built into one weapon. Again, I don't feel like there's too much of a place for this. I would honestly suspect that Male Morgan might be a decent option on AR defense, or potentially as a carry on AR offense, because it seems like with the solo that could be pretty good. But this will highly depend on his stat spread being like high in attack, speed, and probably res, which could very well happen. He could work fairly well like that, but it would highly depend on his stat spread. Nonetheless, the sprite and the art are pretty cool on that.
Any punishment you see fit.
So far, I wouldn't really recommend a spark on him either, to be fair. And again, Dimitri feels kind of outclassed. Feels kind of outclassed by Ingrid personally. Like Cav being better, fire sweep, true damage off of speed, like that. Though that already seems better to me, but you know, Dimitri is fairly popular. I could see it. Anyways, Axe Flyer Morgan. So we've had a lot of like 3-4 star Axe Flyers, and none that were very notable besides Mini Minerva released. So that was over a year ago. I guess Ninja Levitane if you really cared about that, but eh. Weapon is essentially the same as Male Morgan, except it has a slaying effect. So again, I feel like the condition is fairly easy to meet, and the fact that it has an auto follow-up and a deny enemy follow-up synergizes pretty well with the dive bomb effect that she comes with, similar to Tabarin's auto follow-up. But with Tabarin's being a solo, this one being based on bonuses and the debuffs, again, I don't feel like the condition is too hard to meet. It would require a certain unit who negates penalties and has a lull or like an omega lull to really shut down a weapon like that. You'll likely meet this without a problem running something like Tethys with Tamari, no problem. Again, runs the Menace, so self-synergy, solo effect, sure. Not really much more to say to this. I'm not that intrigued by this. I feel like this could potentially be a solid Gale Force unit. similar to Pirates of Barn, I guess.
I am Edelgard von Hresvelg, the one who will free this world of its corruption.
Okay. I mean, okay. Beast colorless armor. We haven't had this since Canagus. And already, without even like showing the skills, I knew as soon as it was a beast armor that it would have a distant counter weapon, because that was like the beast armor effect. But there's a lot more to talk about in a moment, as you'll see. Similar to Legendary Edelgard, we have Armored Stride. She comes with a new set of ideal skills, which actually isn't that hard to meet. I feel like it's probably even better than the catch conditions, because it's based on the unit itself as opposed to the foe. Now, what I want to talk about here is the weapon first. So it does have the distant counter effect if the beast transforms, similar to Canagus. If you use Canagus, then you know exactly how it is. Or beasts in general, they want to at the start of turn transform, and then the secondary effect activates, which is distant counter in this case. But the first part is, it doesn't matter whether she transforms, and here's where things get kind of overloaded, so to speak. So the weapon has slaying. The weapon debuffs enemies' attack and defense. Both her and her enemies cannot follow up attack. So basically Warrior Fighter in that aspect. Slaying, 25% HP condition, which is so easy to meet. And the kicker. If she initiates combat while transformed, okay, so that is required in the first part, she gets another action, which is similar to Raging Storm in the Preference B skill. So this is essentially Gale Force in the weapon as long as you transform at the beginning of the turn. That's nutty. Nuts. Similar to Sumia, where she had like Wings of Mercy in the weapon, and I think Sumia's great because she'll likely age really well or have some really good synergy. Plus she has Kanto. This, like Raging Storm being in the B skill, was what I would call, I don't want to call anything broken per se, but it was like balanced by the fact that she couldn't use Wings of Mercy. And now we gotta discuss the B skill, of course, with Preference B skill. But having like Gale Force in the weapon and slaying means if you give her Gale Force and like a Heavy Blade Seal without even using the A, you essentially have a free Gale Force, like just off of her weapon herself. But what is interesting is the B skill is open. So we'll talk about why you probably don't even need that B skill. So as long as she's 25% HP, she gets it's like Special Fighter essentially. She gets extra special, enemy doesn't. And she heals for 7 at the end of combat, which like whatever, that doesn't matter. The additional effect though is the first combat, she is going to reduce damage by 40%. So I don't actually feel like that's necessary. You could literally swap that out for Wings of Mercy and run a Heavy Blade Seal, and she'll likely meet the condition of her weapon, no problem. The Heavy Blade check, because of her weapon lowering attack, and as all Edelgard forms have, they usually have sky high, highest attack in the game. So while that B skill is pretty solid and acts as a sort of Heavy Blade, the fact that you can swap that out for Wings of Mercy and have, let's say, an initiator like Air Force, lowering her HP to enable Wings of Mercy, or Linge of Horse, that would require a lower amount of mythics. There's a couple other units where you can use chip damage, Fury plus a Fury weapon, and enable that. That seems unique and very strong for a one-off of a unit. I feel like all variants of Edelgard, except maybe the OG version, do pretty well as one-offs, and this is extremely unique enough. The fact that she even has Armored Stride just adds upon to this. Means that I feel like this is likely the unit you should spark if you want the unit that will A, age the best, and B, likely synergize with many Gale Force teams pretty easily, to be honest. Pretty easily. Either as the initiator. So if she's going to be the initiator, you just keep the B skill. If she's not the initiator, swap it out for Wings of Mercy. This is interesting as a spark. And if you're trying to collect those celestial stones, this is the one that I would recommend for sure. Even I'm considering something like this, but I feel I probably don't need it. It's just really cool as a design. And I'm surprised that stuff like this still exists. Like they're still able to make these kind of effects. It seems so simple, but to me that's really cool. Alright, so not mentioned here is the GHB is going to be Orson, who comes from Sacred Stones, if you don't know. I will cover him once we know more about him, which will probably be tomorrow. So yeah, Spark, get a Celestial Stone. That pretty much covers my impressions, reaction to these new units. Honestly, none of them are very impressive except Edelgard. Edelgard definitely is the winner of this batch, and if you're going to spark something or even make like a plus 10 merge project, it likely is Edelgard again. Like the win, I feel like she just wins over Dimitri most of the time, and this one doesn't really surprise me that it does again. Colorless also not being green, locked to green, means she has some pretty good matchups. But that's enough about that. Maybe I will talk about her in a future video where as a one-off she's good, and I'm sure she will be. That's all for me, folks. If you enjoy this type of content, as always, turn on the blue color of your thumbs up below me. Hope you enjoy this. Sub if you haven't already. Let me know in the console what you think of these units. I will see you guys likely on Twitch if you watch the Twitch, or the next video. Join the Discord for more discussions. Love you all. See you in the next one. Peace.
It's over.